The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not, no retribution, and where you can subscribe to my Twitter feed, twitter.com/GaryBaumgarten, where you can be brought up to date on a lot of interesting things happening in the news. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we are syndicated to an additional 12 million households. Welcome to the show. Well, we were talking to the guest, and just as we went to air, his telephone died on us. Okay, this is not a Pal Talk issue. This is a telephone issue. So while we're waiting for Boaz to reconnect with the gentleman, and then I will introduce him for you, I want to tell you about a couple of the stories that are on the Twitter feed today, and maybe we'll talk about that after or in lieu of the discussion with Robert Abrams if we're unable to reconnect with him. The top story I have in reverse chronological order on today's thank you, Boaz. On today's Twitter feed has to do with a huge bust of people, including Mexican drug lords, who were involved in a massive operation of dumping billions of dollars of drugs on the U.S. economy and then taking that money across the border to Mexico. We may get into that a little later, but fortunately we have reconnected with our guest, Robert Abrams. You know, people who are on the East Coast are already turning to the Weather Channel to see what's going on with Hurricane Bill. Yep, the hurricane season, slow start, is just beginning again. I believe today is the anniversary of when Hurricane Katrina made landfall down in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and, as we well know, in New Orleans. And, you know, after that was over and during that event, there was a lot of second guessing. The fact remains that we were unprepared as a nation for that event. I can tell you that from personal experience, having covered it for CNN Radio. Our guest, Robert Abrams, is an emergency preparedness expert. He's author of a book that's just coming out today, Watered Down Truth, A Flood of Lies That Was More Deadly Than Hurricane Katrina. Robert Abrams has been touring the country, evaluating cities' emergency preparedness protocols, consulting with local leaders, and finding, shockingly, horror to horror, that a lot of places are still not prepared in the event of a hurricane. And we wanted to get Robert on the show to talk about what local governments, state governments, federal government can do better and what we can do to prepare ourselves in the event of a hurricane. Robert Abrams, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure having you, sir. Now, I understand, I admit I have not yet seen the book, that you really emphasize the role of local governments in preparedness. And let me just very briefly suggest that I believe you are exactly on the mark. When I went down to cover Katrina for CNN Radio, my first stop was Biloxi. And the people of Biloxi, and I mean the government and the people, really worked together to respond to that event. Whereas in New Orleans, the local government was extremely ill prepared for a disaster of the magnitude that visited that wonderful city. The federal government, if anybody was expecting to come in riding like the cavalry to save the wagon train from the Indians. It never happened, really. They really didn't get mobilized properly until way, way after the event itself. And so if your message, sir, is that local governments have to be on the first line of defense on this issue, I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, let me begin by saying that Watered Down Truth tells a story about, and I'm sure most of your listeners will remember this, the story of 35 nursing home residents who drowned to death in a nursing home during Hurricane Katrina. And the nursing home owners were prosecuted by, I believe, a very overzealous attorney general. And at the end of the day, the nursing home owners were acquitted. But what the story really showed is that this was not, as I'm sure you appreciate, wasn't a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster. The incompetence of the government on all levels, federal, state, and local level, was unbelievable and, quite frankly, responsible for much of the damage and probably a majority of the deaths that took place during Katrina. And you probably remember the visual of Governor Blanco, who was governor of Louisiana at that time, Mayor Nagin of Louisiana, and the president, in pictures together long after it happened, walking around. And for the first couple of months, they spoke about how they did this great job, they were doing the best they can. And then when they realized that the public sentiment was strongly against them for their incompetence and for their political battling, they apologized to each other and basically asked the public for a political do-over. But you don't get a political do-over when you're basically responsible for this type of tragedy. In addition, when you mention about the local community, you're so right. The local community, they know each other, they know their community, they know the people know each other, the families are there, the friends are there. They need to be able to work together. And I think it's the role of government on all levels to give the information and the resources that are necessary so the local community could take care of themselves.
I don't mean for this to be a commercial for Walmart, but I will tell you that while the federal government was having trouble mobilizing to bring supplies into the area, there was truckload after truckload after truckload after truckload after truckload of supplies coming in from Sam's Club. The Southern Baptists were there with their disaster vehicles handing out meals. The Red Cross was there going up and down the streets of devastated neighborhoods. The Salvation Army was there, but the federal government was nowhere to be seen. How is that even possible?
Yep. Gary, not only are you right about Walmart, but there were a lot of vendors and businesses and individuals, community leaders who were able to go back and forth with no problem. The Times-Picayune, which is the probably the leading state paper in Louisiana, they had a great editorial, which I believe they won a Pulitzer Prize for, which basically said, hey, everybody could get in except for the federal government. You had the President of the United States saying it was impassable, they couldn't get in, and then